All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and for those of you who are watching live, I do apologize for the slightly late start. I don't like to apologize. I'm sort of that mindset. I'm sorry about this. Now you just do your job, you just do your show, your live stream, what have you, and hopefully people enjoy it. But I do want to maintain that noon start time as reliably as I possibly can. This isn't radio. Radio, you have to start on the clock and end on the clock. Those who listen to my old Monterey show know that I was pretty good at maintaining a schedule. Being in the studio at 6:06 a.m. Pacific time was not always easy for me, and every now and then if I was stopped on my bike ride in or got a little bit of a later start than I expected, or the traffic lights were against me, maybe I wouldn't make it quite as early as I had hoped, but I generally was there when I was supposed to be. I try to do even better now. Most of the time I think I succeed, sometimes I don't. So when I get the program going a little bit tardy, I do want to let you know I apologize. Had a bunch of things I was doing today and didn't get up quite early enough. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. That's my story. 240-363-7190 if you want to join me. 240-363-7190. And I did start with a very, tendentious or critical, harshly critical of Israel promo for this live stream, which was that Israel can't wait to start killing Palestinians. And maybe that was a little bit unfair. Maybe that was a little bit over the top. Sometimes you try to be provocative. You try to get people's attention with the promos. And perhaps I went a little far. But I do feel that Israel has, throughout this particular conflict, if you want to call it that, they're stepping up, amping up, ramping up the oppression, the killing of the Palestinians, the occupation, and their actions and activities have been just simply indefensible. I mean, I know people say, well, what about October 7th? And my response is, well, what about it? I mean, yes, Hamas killed 1,200 Israelis. It was an atrocity. There's no question. It was a massacre. And they took hostages as well. Yes, that's all true. I get that. That doesn't mean that it's okay in any way for Israel to retaliate by killing now 15,000 civilians in Gaza. It's simply not. I mean, one is not really, they're not related. I mean, I get it. The pretext, the excuse that Israel is using to murder 15,000 Gazans is that they themselves were victimized by Hamas. But again, it's sort of like, well, we turned Iraq, the United States Army turned Iraq into rubble because of 9/11. But, so, I mean, okay, 9/11 happened here. Iraq had nothing to do with it. So 9/11 doesn't in any way excuse or justify or provide any legitimate explanation for what the United States did to Iraq and by extension the Middle East. None whatsoever. In fact, our actions in the Middle East only made it more likely that we would again be victimized. Join me on Halitics, 240-363-7190 if you're watching live. Click the square, bottom right of your screen, blue and white, Halitics, to subscribe, and please click like. And I will just throw this out there. I really wanted to get up to 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Doesn't look like we're going to get there. Things have been a little slower than I had hoped. But we are still moving forward, and we're going to continue to move forward. I just hope that you'll share your thoughts, your feelings, especially if they're positive about Halitics, to people that you know who might also be interested. Post on social media, click links, and if you have an issue with anything I've written or said, because I don't really write much these days, put it in your response to our to the program. And I do have for some reason this morning I got into it with Jeff a little bit. Just he had posted a lot of what I think very unfair. I mean, you can post whatever you want. I'm not going to, unless that you insult someone other than me, or if you make a personal attack on me, I might delete your post. But pretty much, the most, what I believe to be the most inaccurate claims about what I've said or my implications about my views, I'm going to just respond, maybe I'll just ignore it. I'm not going to delete what you write. I just felt like, I don't know where he was even got me. It just seemed like he wasn't even watching my live stream. And which, by the way, I believe you do, Jeff, and I could not appreciate you more. But, you're seeing and hearing what isn't there. It's kind of strange. And it's also very, very disappointing because on a lot of, I guess, I want to say issues, a lot of facts, we agree. I think you and I see eye to eye in a lot of areas, especially our views of the Democratic Party. And if you have a problem with things that I write or that I say, write on social media, please let me know. Please let everyone know what you disagree with. But you know what would also be nice? When you agree with me, say, yeah, hell, I got to say, you got this correct. And you never do that. So, Jeff, I think that might be a good thing. I try when I read what you post, and you've seen this. I'll be like, yeah, I agree with you here. I think that the goal, and the reason I think maybe we disagree, we have a different response to each other, different way of responding. I am really looking for solutions. I really want to make things better. And I question whether your commitment, Jeff, is to making things better. I think you're happy enough with the way things are that you're not really concerned about improving life for, the 349,999,999 other Americans, for whom life may not be quite as good, or, for many of them, obviously, the billionaire class is doing better than either, and happier. Although I don't know, how could you even be happy if you're that rich and you have the ability to see so far into the future, right? I mean, because if you're poor, if you're struggling, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's hard to look past next week, right? It's hard to look past next month. Got a few $1 billion. You're thinking about 3, 4, 5 generations in the future. And if that's your frame, right? Your frame of reference goes to your great-grandkids or your great-great-grandkids, then don't you have to be incredibly depressed? I mean, if you're living, barely surviving, paycheck to paycheck, so you have a short window, right? You have a short future to think about. You have a good week. Maybe you're a server in a restaurant or you're a construction worker. I don't know, whatever. You get extra time. You get some bonus time. You get extra money. You find there's a windfall. You serve a table where they're really generous and they, leave $100 bill on the table. Hey, that's good. I got a good week going here. I'm going to have plenty of, food for my kids. The rent will be paid. You can be happy about that. True, down the road, you're going to face the same exact struggles. But when you're a struggling person, there are weeks, there are months probably, even years where things are pretty good relative to other times. But if you're a billionaire and your frame of reference is, 100 years from now, how can you possibly have any optimism? I don't get it. That's why I would think the billionaire class, the elites, would be more determined to guarantee a future for our planet, for all of us. But apparently they're not. Okay, so I said Israel, to still get back to Israel, and this is what's been on the screen the whole time that I've been talking. And I had said I was skeptical. I'm not big on conspiracy theories. I don't think Israel, I really doubt there was a witting decision to wave in Hamas and say, yes, do your worst to us. We're going to lie down and let you kill us for a while. And then we'll use that as a pretext to murder, 10, 12 times as many of you, right? Because 1,200 murdered, killed by Hamas. Now over 15,000, 12 times as many by Israel. So I'd have to see, or hear on video a conversation where Netanyahu is saying, oh yeah, they're coming in, let them come, let them do their worst, and then we're going to start killing Palestinians. I'm not saying Netanyahu opposed, is upset, right? I'm not saying he's disappointed or he's sorry about the way things turned out. He may well be very pleased. It strengthened his hand. And it's allowed him to gratify his bloodlust, his most violent, murderous impulses. So I'm not saying he is sorry or disappointed that the hostages were taken and 1,200 Israelis were murdered by Hamas. I'm not saying that he's actually saddened by that turn of events, because I don't think he is. I think, if anything, he's pleased, given his response. But what I'm saying is, I'm not at the point where I say he actually planned to let this happen. But you do have to start to wonder, right? This is from The Guardian. You can see 3 hours ago, so 9:17 Eastern Standard Time, just a little over 3 hours ago. Israel's military, and this is from a report in The Guardian of a Israel newspaper, and what they had to say. And so the newspaper in Israel is reporting that Israel's military intelligence officials were given a highly detailed warning that Hamas was actively training to take over Kibbutzim on the Gaza border, which is where the attack transpired, and overrun military posts, which they did, and their goal was to inflict substantial fatality. So according to the Israeli media, the military, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, had ample warning, detailed warning, and they didn't stop it. So this is clearly going to give, I guess, major impetus to those who, the conspiracy theorists, right? I mean, it supports that theory. And, it's awful. I mean, again, just seeing, all that innocent life lost that didn't have to be. And then, of course, the way Israel's responding. Now, look, I don't think, I'm not one of these believers that, oh, yeah, something good, well, I guess obviously something good can come of a tragedy. But, that doesn't say, okay, we're glad, it's good. It's a good thing that this happened. It's a terrible thing that it happened. But if Israel was able somehow to take stock and say, yeah, we've got to stop. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Let's respond with love, with kindness, with generosity to the people we've been persecuting and oppressing for decades. They would be safer today. The world would be a better place today. Obviously, that's not what Israel did. So, more, 1U update. I can't click on that 1U update. The claim made by Israel's Channel 12 was based on details that I guess, I don't even know what that is, because it says 1U updates. I don't know what that means. But apparently, there were all these warnings that were being discussed by their cyber intelligence, and that was dismissed. Some senior intelligence officer said, don't worry about it. It's imaginary. It's not going to happen. Well, obviously, that intelligence officer, I would expect, is now conducting intelligence in the IDF's post in Antarctica, because clearly he shouldn't be doing any intelligence readings anywhere there are actual people who are determined to do harm to Israelis, because he sure as heck didn't protect them. did just the opposite. And they, according to these emails that The Guardian is reporting were received, Hamas went as far as giving a mocked-up kibbutz used in training a name and practiced raising a flag over a synagogue. Apparently, that's pretty close to what actually did happen. And it was completely ignored, disregarded. There was no... It was sort of like, on December 7th, you hear a lot of the conspiracy theorists that somehow FDR itching to get into war with Europe against the Nazis and maybe Japan as well, that the U.S. Navy had some reports that the Japanese were planning to attack Pearl Harbor. Now, my understanding, could be wrong, my understanding is the reports were more, there was a lot of activity, a lot of communications were being intercepted, but there was no real specificity. So the U.S. Navy had an idea that the Japanese were planning something, but it really didn't know what that was. And they were caught, obviously, with their pants down on December 7th, 1941. But the actual intelligence that the U.S. Navy had in advance of December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor was far less than what appears the IDF had and promptly ignored prior to October 7th. So you want to believe that Netanyahu, the Likud, the hard right extremists in the Israeli Knesset and in the military decided to wave in Hamas so they could use that as a pretext to crush Gaza. You got evidence. Not saying that's what happened, but you got the evidence. So that supports, right? Israel, if you want to believe that, if you do believe that, and I'm not saying it's false, but I'm not there yet, supports the claim that Israel wants to kill Palestinians. More evidence, and this is really, I don't want to blame look, we're not all responsible for what our leaders do, right? I mean, I don't feel responsible for what Joe Biden does. I don't feel responsible for what Trump did when he was president. I don't feel responsible for what Obama did when he was president. I mean, they've all done terrible, terrible things and hurt millions of people and been selfish and, inconsiderate, thoughtless. They have not represented the American people, any of those people, any of them, certainly George W. Bush, but the worst of all. They're bad people. They've done really bad things. Are they bad people? Bad people do bad things. That's my formulation. They all did bad things. They've all done bad things. I don't blame Israel for everything that Netanyahu does, but the bottom line is they continue to elect him. Now, I know he hasn't even been getting a majority vote, but they have a parliamentary system and they can't seem to unite behind anyone better. So, again, I don't blame Israel, every Israeli. I know there's some who really oppose Netanyahu, but at some point, we have to be at least somewhat responsible for what our leaders do. If you live in a democracy or a quasi-democracy or a republic or whatever you want to call it. And here we have a situation where, and you can see the dateline yesterday. This is the Hindustan Times. This was the article. I found this article. It looked like something worth quoting and discussing briefly. Biden calling for a two-state solution. Now, I, as you know, don't believe a two-state solution is viable. The only way to achieve any real peace is a one-state solution. So a two-state solution is a chimera. It's a mirage. And by the way, who should know this better than the Indians, who can look at what happened when they broke their country up into India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, how that's led to all the war with with the potential for nuclear holocaust as a result. So obviously the solution has to be a one-state solution between the river and the sea. Everyone is free. Everyone is free. And I spoke about that with Arlen. He couldn't really even grapple with it. And I don't get that. Why is that hard for people to understand? I truly don't. I don't understand. I can't. Why is that hard? But whatever. If you want to tell me why that you think people can't accept, can't even consider a one-state solution, let me know. 240-363-7190. But the bottom line is, as much as a two-state solution will not solve anything in the end, it'll just mean there'll be two states at war, Israel and the other state. At least it's something to discuss, right? At least it's something you go to Hamas, you go to the Palestinians if you're Israel and say, okay, let's talk about a two-state solution. Let's talk about some kind of true self-determination for the Palestinian people. Anything's better than killing, right? Even talking about a solution that's no solution at all is better than endless war. And then maybe if we start with the discussion of a two-state solution, we can at some point get to a real solution, right? When we stop talking about something that has no ultimate success chance. I mean, it might get imposed. It would just lead to ultimately more war. But if we talk and we don't kill each other now, maybe we'll get to a one-state solution later. And that, I think Biden probably, I don't know, hell he thinks, right? I mean, I don't care. But he's saying, stop killing, start talking about a two-state solution. And that is certainly less bad than killing. Netanyahu, no. We're going to resume our campaign with full force once a temporary truce comes to an end. And the truce looks like it'll probably come to an end tomorrow, maybe Thursday. I think they may have extended it one more day to Thursday. Of course, there's still more killing going on in the Middle East. Hezbollah and Israel are going at it in northern Israel, southern Lebanon. So Israel's still killing Muslims, but they're killing them in the northern border lands of Israel, not in the southwest. Yeah, southwest, because that's where Gaza is, southwest. All right, 240-363-7190 if you want to talk to me. 240-363-7190. Anyway, I'm not, look, two-state solution is not viable. But talking about it, discussing it is certainly better than killing. And what we have, those are your choices right now, apparently. From The Guardian, and this is also earlier today, just about 3 hours ago, right? Eastern Standard Time, 3 hours, because we're on standard. We're not on daylight right now. We're on standard. 3 hours ago, the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff, military ready to continue fighting and using truce to strengthen readiness. How much more readiness do you need? Basically, as far as I know, there have been virtually no Israeli casualties after October 7th. Virtually none. 15,000, maybe I'm wrong. Probably missed a few. 15,000 dead Palestinians. A handful of Israelis. How much more ready do you need to be, Herzi Halevi? And when are we going to, as a nation, unify? America. When are Americans going to unite and recognize just how fundamentally evil what Israel is doing to Gaza is? I mean, I hope that happens, but we're so tribal. We're so prepared to justify the actions of people we view as on our side. It's very, very sad. It's just, it's the ruin of the world. This is the tribalism that served individual human organisms or humanoid organisms for so well for millions of years. has come to a point now where it is absolutely leading to our ultimate and very, very rapid demise. 240-363-7190 if you want to join me. 240-36. And please, again, click that subscribe. Click the subscribe. Joe Biden in trouble? Bad news for Joe? Let's look at the polls first. I want to just show you these polls because they're not good. I mean, I haven't been looking at the polls much. I really don't. It's hard to see light. Okay, so this is the most recent. I think Real Clear Politics, I know 538 has its own rubric or metric or algorithm or whatever the hell you want to call it. But RCP, Real Clear Politics, does a really good job of making it very accessible. And if you look at these polls, I mean, it's really tough to spin this as anything but rough for Biden. Now, I'm not saying it's over. Of course not. I mean, the biggest lead you see in these numbers is +6 for Trump from two polls. Messenger, I don't know what the heck that is, and Harvard Harris, which I understand is not a reliable poll. So, it's not like these are the world's greatest polls. There's a few. The two that stand out when I looked at this, I was like, are any of these polls really considered high-end, high-quality polls? And I rely on what's his name? Silver, Nate Silver from 538. I don't like the way they present polls. I don't like the way they use the graphics, which aren't clear the way, how clear this is. Very, very clear, right? You see the poll, you see the days of the poll, the sample, the margin of error, and you see how much Trump has and how much Biden. So it's very, very clear, very easy to decipher. But Silver does rate pollsters. And the two that jumped out at me as reliable in this list were the NBC News and the Fox News pollsters, both of whom are given very top marks by Silver. So therefore, if and that's not a lot of polls. The NY Times isn't here, but remember the Times poll came out a few weeks ago that showed Trump with a significant advantage. The Washington Post isn't here, but there was a Washington Post poll that showed Trump with a significant advantage. So what we're seeing here is consistent with other polls that aren't listed, and even the weaker polls that aren't considered reliable are all in the same ballpark. And that is something that Silver also says. When you look at polls, you want to kind of, see, are there outliers? Are they all pretty much pointing out? They could all be wrong. They could all have similar error of measurements. But it seems in this case, that's always possible. But generally the polls, even in 2016, when Hillary lost and the predictions were she'd win, the polls actually showed a pretty close race, at least according to Silver. And she did win the popular vote, a plurality of it, just as the pollsters predicted. So even 2016 wasn't such a bad year for the pollsters. The problem wasn't the pollsters so much as the analyses of the polls, which concluded that, and this is in 2016, that Hillary was a shoo-in, that Hillary was a lock, that Trump had no chance. And that is something that Silver's pointed out. The polls actually didn't show any such thing in 2016. So right now, Trump is clearly leading. He's leading at or slightly above the margin of error, which you see is around 3-4 in these polls. That's about where he is. You're not seeing any slippage, right? You're not seeing, they were doing better. In fact, the only poll he showed leading here is the one that was is the oldest one back in November 12th. But Biden's in trouble. That's the bomb. The mean lose. It's way in advance. I'd never bet anyway, but I wouldn't bet on Trump to win this thing by any means. But you can't be happy if you're on the president's team, right? I mean, you can't. Because among other things that would really worry me is that the Electoral College does skew towards the Republicans. In other words, not all the time, but because of the way votes are distributed in this country, if you have an even Steven race in terms of the popular vote between two candidates, it's more likely, given the way our states are allocated electoral votes and given the way the population, the demographics are within the states in terms of Republican versus Democrats, a dead even race favors the Republican in most cases in the Electoral College. So Trump's got work to do. Biden's got work to do if he's going to win. He's going to have to overcome the apparent deficit he's facing in the polls right now in the popular vote and even go beyond that. Probably got to make up 5 or 6 percentage points to be the favorite. Can he do it? Sure. Will he do it? I don't know. But I wouldn't be happy. And the evidence that he'll do it, or the likelihood that he will do it, is made less sure if you read this based on the evidence presented in this article posted in today's New York Times early this morning. Biden's voters. Okay, so these are the people who actually voted, right? Usually people are very tribal. You know, I voted for Biden. He must be a good president. That's something that people all the time do, right? It's rationalization. It's post hoc rationalization. You do something, and because you did it, it was a good idea, right? Once you buy a car, I don't want to believe you made a mistake buying the car. You want to believe you bought the right car. Oh, I love the car, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe it's not as good as you hoped. But even you're going to tell yourself, right? It's not just you're justifying it to others. You're going to tell yourself, yeah, it was a good idea. It was a good car. I like it. I know it's been in the shop a lot, but man, it drives nice. You know, we try to rationalize and justify our decisions. So no one wants to think I'm a sucker. No one wants to think I'm a chump. No one wants to think they were made a fool of. Just like the Trump supporters. Oh, it wasn't an insurrection. Oh, Trump's not so bad, right? Whatever you do, you voted for Obama. Oh, he was the best president we've had. I mean, when clearly he was not even close to the best. So people try to justify after the fact, post hoc rationalize bad decisions they made. Given that that's in our makeup, it seems really bad for Joe Biden that despite that fact, despite despite our nature, which is to believe we did something correctly, and therefore that if we voted for Joe Biden, he's probably doing a good job. Most people don't feel that way. Who did vote for him? Most who voted for Biden say fair or poor. Ordinarily, yeah, I would guess a bad omen for incumbents. So why? Why are they there? Why do they think that? And I was really glad Lydia DePillis actually did delve into this a little bit. She does explain, and in fact, and this goes, by the way, we'll get into the specifics of why Biden voters aren't happy with the economy in a moment. But they're less unhappy than Trump voters. I mean, Trump voters, by an overwhelming majority, think the economy was doing better under Trump. And that makes sense. I voted for Trump, and I did the right thing, so Biden must be a bad president. You know, if you're presented with evidence that says Biden is actually you voted for Trump, you think voting for, or let's go the other way because I see it more. You voted for Hillary, you're going to believe the worst about Trump, which so many people did. It doesn't matter how much the evidence shows how bad Hillary is. You're faced with a choice. Either, and it's called cognitive dissonance. Your brain can't handle it. Either I voted for a really bad person, a liar, somebody who's truly corrupt, or all the evidence is fake. It's made up. Right? Hillary Clinton says Donald Trump's one of the worst people in the world. Donald Trump is working for the Russians. The evidence doesn't show that. In fact, it shows just that that's BS. But if you believe that the evidence is BS, if you accept the Mueller report, which says, no, we can't conclude that Trump conspired with Putin. There's nothing that proves that or shows that. If you believe the evidence, then you have to conclude Hillary Clinton's a liar. Rachel Maddow's a liar. I'm a dupe. They made me a chump and a sucker. And that's not something you want to believe, right? No one wants to believe that. So your alternative is, yeah, the evidence is fake. It's lied. It's lying. It's a conspiracy to make me look bad, to make Hillary look bad. And that's why so many people believe these. Believe, oh yeah, Trump must have worked with the Russians because otherwise I must be a sucker, a dupe, a chump. And so the Trump supporters, many of whom may well be doing pretty good under Biden, they're not going to believe that. No, things must be awful. Otherwise, I made a mistake voting for Trump. And nobody wants to believe that either. So in fact, the Biden supporters are the ones who have been most, I guess, harmed, who are demographically not likely to do well under the Joe Biden presidency. The groups that have been hurt by Biden, let me say it differently. I don't know they're hurt by Biden. The groups that have done poorly over the past few years in the Biden administration are groups that overlap pretty strongly, significantly, with the people who supported him. So younger voters, yes, the young did support the Democrats. People from browner voters, right? We know even though Trump did better among voters of color in his second run in 2020 than he did in 2016 and is doing even better now, according to the polling, the great majority of African Americans and a significant majority of Latinos did in fact vote for Biden. And those groups aren't doing particularly well in this administration. They've also been hardest hit by inflation since wages have not gone up nearly as much as prices. The stock market's done well, but wages haven't. So more affluent investor types are actually doing pretty well under Biden. And many of them voted for Biden, but many voted for Trump. And they're still going to claim, because they voted for Trump, that Biden must be bad. That's just how people's minds work. It's how we are. And of course, housing is just completely out of reach of most under 30, 35 people. I mean, I think the percentage of under 40s, 30-somethings and below, living with their parents in the Bay Area is just at absolute record levels. I did see an article of that here. But so the point is that the younger voters, the less affluent voters who supported Biden are doing particularly poorly, relatively, in this administration. And that's very, very bad for Joe Biden. That means that there's going to be a major enthusiasm gap. Even if many of those voters ultimately go to the polls, many won't. Many won't push others to go. And because they're not doing well economically, they won't have much money to give to Biden. So Biden's in trouble. My solution, you go out there and you right now start demanding that the government work for poor, struggling, and working people. You immediately call for policies that will make life better for poor, struggling, and working, for all of them. Not based on race, not based on identity, but based on economic circumstances. Call for debt-free education. Call for Medicare for all. Call for an end to endless wars. You might not win, but you'd be more likely to, A, and B, Joe, and I think this is very important. Some don't care, I do. You'd be doing the right thing. You'd be pointing to a possibly better future. You'd be setting the stage for a Democratic Party that could really be popular with poor, struggling, working people. So do the right thing. Turn on your corporatist backers. Turn on the Democratic elites and the Democratic centrists. Reject them. Insult them. Attack them. Insult them. Call them the corrupt warmongers that they are. I know you're one of them too. Admit it. Take ownership of all the harm you've done, whether it's privatizing the student loan industry, whether it's unshackling the credit card industry, whether it's shepherding Clarence Thomas through the Senate confirmation hearings, whether it's helping George W. Bush destroy Iraq. You did all those things, Joe. Take a knee, acknowledge your error, vow to do better, and start pushing Democrats to be better. And then maybe you'll win. You might still win anyway, I don't know. But whether you win or lose, you'd be doing the right thing. And that's something I think you could be truly proud of, even late in life, even as you're obviously going hard into dementia. You'll know you did the right thing, and hopefully you'll feel good. This is what you have to stand against, Joe. This is what you have to fight against. And I'm not going to talk about now my final story. This isn't going to be about corruption in Congress. This is going to be at the same. Because a lot of people say to me, and I've heard this all the time, really. Well, Congress is a swamp. It's a cesspool. We can't expect people like Jamie Raskin to do the right thing because there's just too much money. There's just too much pressure from other members of Congress, from leadership, to do what the money bags want. There's just they have, and if we reject them, if we reject the corporatists, the corporate elites, if we say no more, we're going to do what's right for our constituents, and for the American people more writ large. If we do that, we'll lose. So the argument is we can't ever expect Congress to do the right thing. That we have to either accept the high level of corruption from the Democrats or true fascism, if you want to believe that that's where the Republicans are, and some of them are for sure, from the Republicans. Those are your choices. But there's sometimes, along with that argument comes the claim, well, but we can make a difference at the state level. The parties aren't as bad. There's not as much corruption. There's not as much money at the state level. So I just wanted to present this. This is from the Maryland Democratic Party. I got this morning from my state senator, not U.S. senator, but my Maryland state senator. His name is Jeff Waldstreicher. He's not the worst state senator. There's things I don't like. He's a Democrat. Keeps his head down, kind of a relatively low-profile guy. A lot of progressives went after him because he wasn't as committed to police reform and criminal justice reform as they wanted. Frankly, that wasn't, in my view, as big a sin as they thought. He did support some relatively positive improvements in policing. And yes, we definitely need more civilian oversight of police. But if you really want to stop the violence by police against citizens, address the wealth gap, address the income gap, guarantee everyone has enough, nobody has too much. And at the same time, do institute police reform. And will reduce, and also gun control, right? The gun control is out of the hands of, unfortunately, to a large degree, state legislators, because the Supreme Court has simply said, we're not going to stop. We're not going to keep people from owning guns so they can kill each other. We're not going to stop the carnage. That's what we're going to guarantee the carnage continues. That's what our Supreme Court has said. But that's the way, if you really cared about reforming police behavior, what you do. I don't think Walt Stryker's the worst, but he's also not a Bernie. He's not even an AOC. He's not going to take on those who run the show, those who are large and in charge. He wants to be one of them. So there's going to be a fundraiser for him. What day is it? I don't even know. I can't even tell from this thing because I blew some stuff up, but I wanted to go through each of it. It's a reception, minimum to get in the room, $100. Minimum. Now, I'm sure people are going to say, well, I could do it. I could pay it. You could, but it's a hardship, right? For most Americans, they can afford to pay the $100. It means there's something they're not going to get. It means they're going to miss out on something else. I think half of all Americans have less than $10,000 in the bank. $100 is significant. And what does that $100 buy you? It puts you in a theater. It puts you in a seat in a theater, Roundhouse Theater, you can see it circled, where you're in the seat listening to the governor, the Senate president, and the chair of the House. No, the House Speaker, the chair of the House, Will Smith. No, I guess he's the Senate chair because he's, I think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Will Smith is one or the other. He's a leader, a Democratic Party leader. You get to sit and listen. You don't have any real influence whatsoever. You're not in a cocktail party where you can mingle. You're just seated there. And this is to show your support for Walt Stryker, who is the vice chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Now, that's the minimum. You want to give less, you can, but you don't get in that room. You don't even get to talk to anybody at all. You don't even get to listen. But you do get to give, if you want, to them. And then you can see up to 4,000. Now, Walt Stryker is the vice chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. This guy faces zero opposition. He ran against a real progressive in the last Senate race. He won by 2/3 of the vote. His seat is totally secure. So why have the fundraiser? Why soak the wealthy people of Montgomery County? Roundhouse Theater's in Bethesda, very wealthy community. Why are you trying to get more money out of them if you've got a guy whose seat is secure? Well, some of that money they'll spread around. It's fertilizer to other Democrats who will then be dependent upon Walt Stryker, beholden to him, have to do what he tells them if they want to keep getting money from him, and they'll feel a lot loyalty. Of course, that's human nature. So that's part of the reason. The other reason I think that they're doing this is because the question arises, should Jeff Walt Stryker become the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee? Well, one way we can decide is to see how much money he can raise. If the money people like him and they're going to support him, and that by extension they'll be very happy with us as Democrats, the corporate elites, the big shots in the law firms, the for-profit healthcare chairs, the $1 million plus a year surgeons who like for-profit healthcare. If they're all happy with Walt Stryker, we'll be happy too. And if they're not, well, then maybe we'll find somebody else. All right? This is pure and simple influence peddling at its ugliest, at its most blatant, without any possible argument that it's something else. We have to renounce this party. They're not on our side. They're not on our side. Walt Stryker is up for, I presume, either to remain as vice chair of the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, or perhaps even be made the chair. Chairs have tremendous power. Chairs decide what legislation ultimately makes it to the floor. If a chair doesn't like legislation, or let me put it a different way, if the financial backers and funders of the chair don't like legislation, it doesn't make it to the floor of the Senate for a vote, at which point it will not become law. So the committee chairs have tremendous power. They're chosen by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. In this case, since Walt Stryker is a senator, he has to get the approval of the Senate President, Bill Ferguson. So obviously, this is all being done to determine if he's acceptable. And not only acceptable, how much he can create, how much money can he generate for our party. That's meaning the governor, Wes Moore, and the other top power figures. They're not on your side unless you start writing them huge checks. They're not on your side. We have to find something better. I'll say it differently. We have to find something that's ultimately not evil, that ultimately isn't corrupt. And I'll tell you what, it sure ain't the Republican Party. I do want to focus a little more. So this is for the question of who's going to be the chair of the Maryland State Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. Who's going to stay either as chair, or will he stay as vice chair, Walt Stryker? Will he be elevated to chair at some point, or will he have to go back into the riffraff of the Senate? I live in Maryland. I think I'm knowledgeable. I really didn't know much about what this committee does, so I looked it up, and I suspected this. I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I suspected that this was a very, very important and influential committee, one of the most, perhaps the most, in the Maryland government. And so you decide if you agree. This committee is assigned legislation relating to constitutional amendments, corporation. I highlighted what I thought stood out most: criminal and civil laws, the legal profession, and landlord and tenant laws. Incredibly important. Trusts and estates too. I didn't highlight that. So these laws are incredibly relevant, especially often when it comes to economic justice issues, right? How much power do corporations have over us? What influence and what are the ethical responsibilities on lawyers? How much can landlords raise rents? How protected are tenants from evictions? Will we raise or lower the tax on estates? Will we raise or lower the estate tax exemption? In other words, the amount of an estate below which you don't pay taxes on when you die, or your heirs don't have to pay tax on. Those are questions that relate directly to inequality, to justice for all, economic justice for all. And who gets to be the most powerful person in the Maryland State Senate when it comes to deciding which laws will pass and which won't, that impact on justice, economic justice, corporate, holding corporations accountable? Who gets to decide that? Guy who raises the most money. I mean, can you think of a worse system? I know there are those of you who say, "Oh, they're better than the Republicans." It's hard to imagine being much worse than these people. It really is. Fascism is, yes, where we don't, quote, choose our leaders. But fascism is also when the corporate is a melding of corporate interests and the state. And we have that. We have that. Those who represent corporations, who own corporations, who are paid millions by corporations, they are the same people who are choosing who has power in our government and who doesn't. And that's not just at the federal level. I think we all know that. at the state level too. We have got to find an alternative to this duopoly. Vote for Jill Stein. Vote for Cornel West. Vote for someone other than a Democratic incumbent or a Democrat who is running and to perpetuate Democratic policies. If we don't do that, then we're insane. If we expect anything different, we expect anything to change, because it won't. All right. Thanks so much for watching Halitics, for being part of Halitics. Please click like, please click subscribe, and please join me. I love to get the calls. I'll be back tomorrow. And want to let you know, speaking of Maryland, we'll be talking to Juan Dominguez running for senator, U.S. Senate in Maryland. He'll be on my program Thursday. You're not going to want to miss that.